Oh, Donald, so you want to know why people from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark aren't lining up to immigrate here? The answer isn't even a mystery, it's a spreadsheet. I mean, you act like migration is just about winning a spot in America, but for a Scandinavian, moving to the US isn't an upgrade. On most measurable metrics of human well being, it's a downgrade. On paper, critics here call the Nordic countries socialist nanny states. In reality, they're some of the freest societies on earth. Freedom and democracy indexes regularly place them near the top of the world rankings, while the US sits noticeably lower down the list. You love to say they hate freedom, but look at who actually has control over their own lives. In Scandinavia, abortion is treated as healthcare, legal under national rules, widely accessible within set time limits, and covered by public systems. In the US, a woman's freedom over her own body now depends on which state line she crosses, with outright bans and criminal penalties in large parts of the country. To them, that doesn't look like freedom, it looks like a human rights problem. Their freedom isn't just on paper, it shows up in daily life. In Sweden and Norway, there's the principle of every man's right, which allows people to hike, camp briefly, and forage on most land, including private land, as long as they respect nature and property. You know, that's a difficult concept for people in the US to understand. And so in the US, the default is no trespassing signs and stand your ground laws. On LGBTQ plus rights, international surveys of social acceptance and legal protections consistently show Nordic countries among the safest and most accepting places on earth, while multiple US states are actively rolling back protections and targeting queer and trans people in law. In Scandinavia, equality is close to the default setting. Here, basic recognition is still treated as a culture war issue. For women, the comparison is brutal. The World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap reports keep Iceland, Finland, Norway, and Sweden clustered at the very top of the global rankings for gender equality. The United States sits much further down, with secondary sources based on the same data putting it around the 40s and behind countries Americans almost never mention when talking about who treats women best, places like Costa Rica, Liberia, Nicaragua, Namibia, Colombia, and Cabo Verde. In the US, having a baby is a financial shock. Hospital bills, little or no paid leave, and some of the highest childcare costs in the OECD. In Scandinavia, childbirth is treated as a normal supported life event. Parents get substantial paid parental leave, and childcare is heavily subsidized or capped so women aren't punished economically for having children. They design policy around biology. We effectively punish women for becoming mothers. Well, race is exactly where you do not need to romanticize anyone, right? Scandinavia is not a racial utopia. Experiments and reports show that applicants with foreign-sounding names get fewer callbacks, and there are real issues with segregation, xenophobia, and discrimination. But the depth of harm is different. In the US, race is tightly bound up with incarceration, policing, maternal mortality, and wealth gaps. Being black or brown here significantly raises your risk of being imprisoned, dying in childbirth, or being killed by police. In Nordic countries, bias and exclusion exist and matter, but universal health care, tuition-free or low-fee higher education, and parental leave still formally apply to everyone, regardless of race or origin. Their racism is a serious social problem. Ours is a life-and-death structural problem. When you turn to the American dream, the numbers don't save you. Either the World Economic Forum's Global Social Mobility work ranks Denmark, Norway, and Sweden among the countries where it's easiest to move up if you're born poor, while the US sits well below them, down in the 20-something range. Translation: if you want to be born low income and have a real shot at ending up safely middle class, the math says Copenhagen gives you better odds than Detroit, right? On healthcare, it's even uglier. In the US, research on personal bankruptcy shows that medical bills or illnesses are central factors in a large share of filings because even insured patients face high premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket charges. In universal coverage systems like Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, core treatment is financed through taxes, and user fees are heavily capped or subsidized, and the explicit design goal is that using the health system should not bankrupt you, right? Why would they trade that for a system where freedom means the freedom to lose your house because you got cancer? Even if you move to wages and work, the story doesn't flip. Measured in average wages adjusted for purchasing power, the US is a high-income country, but Denmark and Sweden are also among the higher-wage OECD economies, and Sweden isn't far behind. The key difference is time, right? OECD-based data show US workers putting in roughly 1750 to 1800 hours a year on average, while workers in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway are down around 1350 to 1450 hours. That's on the order of 300 to 450 extra hours of free time per year for the typical Nordic worker, weeks of life Americans are spending at work instead of with their families are resting. And despite Americans working more and the U.S. spending far more per person on healthcare, life expectancy here is several years lower. Recent figures put the Nordics around 82 to 83 years, while the U.S. has slipped back into the upper 70s. In practice, it's work more, live less versus work less, live longer. So because I know this is going to show up in my comment section, let's talk about taxes. Yes, headline tax rates on income and consumption are higher in the Nordics, but Americans pay what you can honestly call private taxes, really. We pay lower income tax, then get hammered by premiums, deductibles, co-pays, out-of-pocket bills, thousands per month for childcare and years of student loan repayments. What we save in taxes often gets eaten up and more than eaten up in private bills. A Swede pays taxes to the state and in return gets guaranteed services, healthcare, schooling, parental leave, and a stronger income safety net. An American pays premiums to an insurance company for the right to keep paying a deductible later. They fund a functioning social infrastructure. We fund gatekeepers and billing departments, right? The way benefits are structured here is a scam dressed up as generosity. In the U.S., employers sell you on a total compensation package, right? We've all heard that. Health, dental, and a 401k, but those benefits are golden handcuffs. They're tied to your job, so if you get laid off or you want to start your own business, your healthcare and retirement security go with them. In Nordic countries, the core protections are part of social citizenship. Healthcare, unemployment benefits, parental leave, and pensions are built into the national systems, and the safety net follows the person, not the employer. The crime narrative is another place where selective framing does a lot of work, right? It's true that Sweden has seen a real increase in gun-related gang violence and shootings compared with other Western European countries. But even with that spike, its intentional homicide rate is just above 1 per 100,000 people. The U.S., by contrast, sits around 5 to 6 per 100,000, several times higher. So even in what Swedes themselves call a crime crisis, their cities, by the numbers, are still a lot safer from lethal violence than many supposedly normal American cities. Let's talk about the shithole countries, Donald. You called them that, but you left out who dug the hole. A lot of the states sending migrants north today weren't just unlucky, they were systematically exploited and destabilized by the very countries now complaining. Take Haiti. After fighting off slavery and French colonialism, Haiti was forced to pay an independence indemnity to France for decades. Historians and economists estimate that when you include lost growth and interest, that added up to tens of billions of dollars in today's money. The United States later occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934, took control of its finances, and pushed constitutional changes that helped open land and key resources to foreign interests. And let's look at Central America. Today, you point at migrants from places like El Salvador and Guatemala and talk about failed states. In the late 20th century, the U.S. poured money, weapons, and training into brutal civil conflicts across the region, backing regimes and armed groups that committed massive human rights abuses in the name of anti-communism and corporate stability. When you help fuel civil wars, crush democratic movements, and prop up authoritarian regimes, you don't get to act surprised when people flee north. The Congo is another example. The country's first democratically elected prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, was removed and killed in 1961 in a context of Cold War meddling and Western interest in Congolese minerals. After that, Western powers tolerated long-running authoritarian rule while companies continued to extract copper, cobalt, uranium, and other resources on favorable terms. That's not random chaos, it's structured exploitation. Norwegians, Swedes, and Danes aren't flooding the U.S. because their own societies are already designed to invest in ordinary people's security and quality of life. The countries you sneer at as shitholes are sending people here because the rich states that dominate the global system spent generations extracting wealth from them and undermining their stability. People in Scandinavia have safety nets. People in the U.S. have benefits packages. People in Scandinavia have bodily autonomy. People in large parts of the U.S. have state-mandated pregnancy. People in Scandinavia have a coherent social contract. People here are told that survival itself is a luxury that has to be earned in the marketplace. I hope that helps answer your question, Donald.